I first ran into the concept of chirality as a 15-year-old science nerd Trekkie. I grew up watching the original Star Trek series and enjoyed the hell out of it, even though now going back and rewatching it, I'm kind of appalled and end up in a full-body cringe at some of the blatant sexism and outright jingoism that the original series had. Be that as it may, after going through the entire series, I don't even know how many times, I started reading some of the fan fiction. The fan fiction, of course, was more uneven than the original series had been. Some of it was okay, some of it was downright terrible. One of the ones that fell into the fair to middling category was Spock Must Die by James Blish. Blish had gotten into the Star Trek universe by writing short story adaptations of the original episodes, but this one was entirely original to him. Well, mostly at least. It springboarded off of an episode called Errand of Mercy, in which the Federation and the Klingons are fighting over the control of a peaceful pastoral planet named Organia. Kirk et al. Are trying to stop the Klingons from massacring the Organians and is kind of appalled when the Organians tell him that they're fine with it and don't need any help. And it turns out they really don't. In the end, you find out that the Organians are a super powerful, highly advanced race that only took the appearance of humans so they could communicate. They're so far beyond both the Federation and the Klingons that they really did have nothing to fear. In Spock Must Die, the crew of the Enterprise are sent to find out why Organia has suddenly gone radio silent. It turns out the Klingons have put a force field around the entire planet. Spock volunteers to transport down to see what's going on, and so he steps onto the transporter pad, the button is pushed, and all of a sudden, there are two Spocks, each one claiming to be the original Vulcan. What had happened was that the transporter beam reflected off of the surface of the force field, so one of the Spocks was the original guy, and the other one was the reflection, recreated in place. Since both the original and the duplicate were identical down to the last neuron, they each had the same memories and the same personality, so each one claimed to be the original Spock, and it seemed like there was no way to tell them apart. The key turned out to be that the duplicate had been reflected all the way down to the molecular level. Why this matters is that there are a number of molecules in our body, amino acids and sugars being two examples, that are chiral, meaning they exist in two forms. Just like a glove, they have a left-handed form and a right-handed form. These two mirror images seem alike, but they don't have the same biological activity. In fact, all of our amino acids are left-handed, and we don't really know why. All the sugars are right-handed. No organism known generates right-handed amino acids and left-handed sugars. Further, if you synthesize the wrong-handed molecules in a laboratory, which has been done, and fed it to a terrestrial organism, the organism would not be able to metabolize them and would starve. And that turned out to be the key to figuring out which Spock was which. The reflected Spock was reflected all the way down to the molecular level, so his molecules had the opposite handedness. He soon figured out that he was starving to death on the food he was eating, and so he barricaded himself into a laboratory so he could synthesize the molecules he needed. Clever concept for a story right there. Chirality is quite a mystery. Like I said, the left-handedness of our amino acids is shared by every terrestrial organism, so it must have happened very early in our evolutionary history. Why it happened that way is another matter entirely. One of the most interesting questions about evolutionary biology is evolution constrained? For example, we store our genetic information as DNA. Is it possible that there could be another molecule that could store information the same way? Our primary energy driver is a molecule called ATP. Are there other energy-storing molecules that would work with a different metabolism? The question of constraint goes all the way up to macroscopic features. One good example is cephalization. The sensory organs we have and our central processing unit, our brain, is located near the anterior end, just like with just about every organism on Earth. And it makes sense if you think about it, that your mouth and your sensory organs would be pointing in the direction you're moving. But some other features are probably not constrained. One good example is bilateral symmetry. There seems to be no particular reason that the fact that we're bilateral, that a line down our middle cuts us into two equal halves, would have to be the same in other organisms on other planets, for example. Aficionados of H.P. Lovecraft might recall that in the story At the Mountains of Madness, the aliens had five-way symmetry, something that doesn't occur on Earth. You might be thinking of starfish, but actually those are bilateral. They have a thing called a sieve plate that they use to suck in water, and that's offset to one side. So what appears to be five-way pentaradial symmetry actually is bilateral. All of this comes up because of a study at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. They looked at a meteorite called Asuka 12236, which was a carbonaceous chondrite. That's a type of meteorite that's rich in organic compounds. Asuka 12236 was full of amino acids, which isn't as bizarre as it sounds. It turns out that even in abiotic conditions, amino acids are relatively easy to make from raw materials. What's weird is that all of the amino acids in Asuka 12236 were left-handed, just like the ones on Earth. The scientists studying the meteorite are upfront about the fact that the first thing you have to do is to show that the amino acids in the meteorite weren't absorbed upon impact from some unfortunate terrestrial organism that it hit. Most of the experts, though, seem to think that this is unlikely and that we're actually looking at a sample of extraterrestrial amino acids. The fact that they're all left-handed is pretty remarkable, and it shows that chirality, just like here on Earth, might actually be constrained, and if we went to another planet and found living things, they might have a biochemistry similar to ours. So that's one less thing to worry about if we ever go to an alien world. Unlike our poor reflected Mr. Spock with his right-handed amino acids, if we went to another planet, we might be able to metabolize the amino acids we found there just fine. How similar anything else would be is still an open question. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up. Our resources are down there, and please subscribe to our channel. Thank you.